Hello everyone and welcome to the Commexis Cast Daily for Monday, January 8th, 2018. All the news you need to know from our inbox to yours. I'm Matthew McGrorty, the videographer and podcaster here at Commexis, and today I am joined by the lead strategist at Commexis, Phillip Brooks.
Good afternoon.
And the president of Commexis, Len Ward.
Good afternoon.
So our first story for today, eMarketer has put out a report based on a new study that has found that ad trackers are on more than 75% of websites, and more specifically, it is 77.4. So in a recent examination of more than 144 million web pages loaded in more than a dozen countries, Clicks and Ghostery, the people who did the study, found that 77.4 of all websites had at least one third-party tracker, and in addition, the analysis revealed that a sizable minority, which was about 16.2, featured 10 or more trackers, which is quite a lot. So Google was the most prevalent of these, mostly related to Google Analytics, which had about 46.4% of web pages examined had Google Analytics, and AdSense and DoubleClick were relatively there as well, though not as high. And Facebook was another big one. They had about 21.9% of pages. So in some cases, there were high ad frequency rates. They suggested in this piece that if you have too many trackers, or that if you have trackers in general, they can lead to, obviously, more customized ads, which could lead to people being more likely to ad block your ads. I don't know if I necessarily buy that line. I think most people are just looking to ad block.
That is not the biggest problem I see with that at all.
If you want to go ahead, I'm sure.
Just to start off, first of all, Ghostery is a great app. I use it as a plugin. I've used it for a long time on Chrome. But to me, the first thing that jumps out is Google's emphasis on site speed and how sites load. With all these trackers on the sites, it has to have a negative impact on site speed and loading. And it's only a matter of time before Google starts putting guidelines on how many ad trackers is too many on a site. Given that they're already going to start dinging sites for the site speed in general. But I can guarantee you that the one ad trackers that will not be removed from sites as far as Google's stuff are Google's own. So if you're a third-party ad tracker out there, I would start looking to see what kind of prioritization these sites webmasters are going to be putting on your ad tracker.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things they mentioned in the piece as well, in regards to slowing it down, is a couple companies, so for example, Snap, reversed. Originally, they had stated that they didn't want to use an ad tracker because they were afraid that it would slow down pages in conjunction with other ones. But they recently reversed that and started allowing trackers and their own tracker and ways to track through the Snapchat app into different web pages. So definitely something to keep an eye out on. I would hate if I had 10 trackers on a site and I couldn't load to it. So there you go. So for our second story, Facebook came out with a blog post that had basically 5 graphs and quote unquote, what was the quote? What did they title? Give me 1 second, folks. They called it 5 graphs to change the way you understand mobile video and TV. So Tim Peterson did a nice little breakdown of these 5 graphs. So some of this is going to be a little bit of his editorializing. But the graphs which you'll be seeing in front of you, basically just a frame of reference. There are no numbers on the graphs, as you can see. They are also using Facebook's internal numbers, and it is based on watch time and not completion rate. And the clear thing that you can see from this is that non-skippables, which are non-skippable pre-roll, mid-roll ads, tend to be the best in terms of these graphs. So what do we think about this, guys?
My first thought really is, again, as you've pointed out, there's no real numbers for the benchmarking here, so we don't really have any frame of reference other than what's being compared to their compatriots. I think the other thing that really jumps out at me is that, we're not looking at abandonment rate here at all. We're not factoring that into this at all. I mean, I know that if I come up with a mid-roll ad and it's something I'm only partially interested in, I just scroll on by. So, and I think that the other piece to look at here is, in the feed, in general, you're getting a lot more volume than you're seeing in stories and live TV. So I think in feed that's going to skew those numbers up. I would like to see them kind of independent of one another and see what those kind of look like. I mean, the relevancy in general in some of the stories in live TV already seems to me to be a roadblock to getting the people to stay on there and show that kind of patience anyway. So stuff that's in my feed, I'm a lot more likely to watch anyway. So I don't know if that's necessarily a function of the ads working any better or just because the content is far more relevant to my interests.
Yeah, I think that is a fair point. One small quote that was in the blog post and that Peterson editorialized a little bit was from Mark Rapkin, the Vice President of Ads and Business Platform for Facebook. And he's quoted saying, "There's no longer a singular video experience for advertisers." And then Peterson editorialized a little bit. "Getting a 20-something to watch a story ad for 10 seconds might be harder than getting a senior citizen to sit through 10 seconds of a non-skippable in-stream video ad. So the values of those views should be weighed accordingly." And then quoting again Rapkin, "What's more, those 10 seconds don't tell us much about the value created because duration data alone isn't great at fully predicting business results across different experiences." So basically, Facebook wants you to know that while the graph says that non-skippables are the best, you should not just be front-loading all of your money into it, which I think is a smart idea anyway, not to do that. So, so any final thoughts on that, Len, before we move on?
Zero.
Okay.
I mean, this report's like,
It's squiggles. it's
this is propaganda. Facebook saying, "Put all your money right here."
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly it's very, very obvious that they're pointing towards a certain way.
Yeah. That's okay.
Yeah.
So our final story for today, DigiDay did a little bit of a breakdown of the Facebook journalism project that began 1 year ago.
Yeah, I mean, this is really just kind of checking in on the Facebook journalism project a year later. Campbell Brown, the former NBC News anchor, was appointed the Facebook head of news partnerships, kind of runs this program, and her job is to smooth relations with these prominent news publishers. We're talking NBC, really ABC, CBS, the Wall Street Journal, all these large-scale content publishers and journalists, fitting the old school definition thereof. But it's really kind of just to give you some background on why it was started. Most publishers were saying that Facebook was the fake news thing was spreading a lot. It was contributing to filter bubbles, and they were doing too little to help these publishers monetize the platform. So Facebook created this group. They meet twice annually, and they get a look at products before they launch. They get to give feedback directly to product developers, and they get to work with some of the executives of the company. So they get some access that you or I wouldn't necessarily get. But if you talk to some of these publishers afterwards, they're not saying that that's translating particularly well into just kind of how they work together with one of the things they were looking at was instant articles, which are basically Facebook's answer to Google AMP. So far have basically been a bust. So they haven't worked particularly well, and a lot of people have pulled their money out of them. They're still finding it difficult to monetize video advertising as publishers. It's not working as well for them. I think as a large-scale publisher, having to put that much investment in that type of content, puts them on a far different level than what we're talking about our clients doing. So I don't want to frighten people away from that. I think it's a scale issue and not necessarily a problem with the video content. Again, the fake news initiatives, one of the things they started putting in was that disputed tag. That didn't last particularly long. It's gone already. And most people are still fairly unhappy with the amount of fake news that's getting through still. And the data sharing, despite Facebook sharing some of its tools with the publishers, they're not feeling they're getting a lot of training on how to use them or a lot of understanding and insight as to how that actually has relevancy to their numbers internally. So, I think the thing that I pull away from it is this is in a lot of ways a PR type of thing.
Yeah.
And here's the part that you really need to take away. Publishers need to realize that there's only so much help they can expect to get from Facebook because Facebook's what their business model is fundamentally at odds with what they're doing. Yeah. I mean, that's the piece. It's Facebook is seeking to replace them, and they're basically trying to find a way to make them to lessen their obsolescence as that kind of happens. So Facebook's really just stringing them along in a lot of ways, in my opinion, because they need their content for the Facebook news feed. But if it weren't for the fact that these news gathering channels needed Facebook to needed to fill those feeds for Facebook, I don't see why they would even bother to help them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, one thing that I thought was kind of funny from the article was publishers. One of the comments they made was that they felt like they were being heard a little bit more from Facebook and getting a little bit more feedback, and they were shocked that Facebook, for some publishers, was even talking to them at all.
Yeah.
Which I think definitely says something. So not a whole lot has been changed, but people are a little bit happier that Facebook's at least talking to them. But I would
really
shocks me.
apply the Goodfellas logo.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It was a throwaway line, but Goodfellas, the "F you, give us your money" plan. That's essentially Facebook's option. That's their message to these publishers. We'll try to ease the burden a little bit on you, but in the end, we still just want your money.
How is Facebook going to replace that, though? How are you going to replace Wall Street Journal content? How are you going to replace the Washington Post? I mean, am I missing something? Did they plan for this?
I think that's part of the problem, is that Facebook needs these publishers to provide content, and I think that the fake news thing, because these are being published by not reputable news outlets, and that's being confused for reputable news.
True.
But the problem is that these publishers just aren't able to afford to pay at scale to get this stuff through on Facebook in the way that it needs to get out there. And I think they're looking for Facebook to kind of meet them in the middle, make these services a little more affordable, and help them get this content out there. And Facebook's really kind of like, well, if you want to pay for it, sure, we'll do it, but you got to pay for it. And I think that gap between how much they're asking to pay to really kind of get that stuff out there and what these publishers feel they should have to pay is so vast. That gulf is so vast that that this is just kind of dropping the water and trying to fix that. It's all just PR.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to today's episode of the Commexis Cast Daily. Check us out tomorrow for more of the latest trending news. Have a great day.